Listo, arrancamos, entonces estamos trabajando este curso de Python, vamos en comentarios, pero estábamos viendo cómo manejar errores y excepciones. Seguimos con comentarios, cómo hacer comentarios, realmente pues, ya los estaba venía haciendo, pero pues vamos a verlos.
In this tutorial, I'm going to talk to you guys about comments in Python. We use comments to add notes or comments to our programs. For example, here I'm going to make a print statement. Sky is blue. Now, before that, I can add a comment using a hash sign, and then whatever I type here is going to get ignored. It's not going to get executed. Let me show you. So let's run this program. Look, we only see this message, sky is blue. So with this comment, we can explain something about our code. We can use that as reminders to fix things or clean things up, or we can use it to communicate things with other developers reading our code. Why we have written this code in a certain way. These are good use cases for using comments. We can also have comments over multiple lines, so we can simply add more comments. Each line should start with a new hash sign. Now, one thing you need to avoid when using comments is explaining what the code does. So
You have to avoid what the code does.
So here's an example of a bad comment. Let me just delete these two lines. And with this comment, I'm going to say print sky is blue. Why is this a bad comment? Because it's telling me the obvious. It is obvious that the next line is going to print sky is blue. Now, the problem with this comment is that apart from being verbose and repetitive, if we come back here and change sky to ocean, now this comment gets outdated. So every time we change this code, then we'll have to come back and modify the corresponding comment. So I've seen some developers add comments in front of their functions. For example, they define a function, let's say square, that takes a number and simply returns number times number. Well, it is obvious that this function calculates and returns the square of the given number. So there is really no need to add a comment and explain that. Calculates
Of course. Is to say to give someone permission to. Of course.
and returns the square of a number. This is very repetitive and it creates noise in your code. Someone else reading your code, they get distracted with all these unnecessary comments. So use comments to explain whys and hows, not whats. If you have made certain assumptions, you can use comments to explain.
Si vous êtes en train d'apprendre l'anglais, vous me remercierez plus tard. Voici la méthode Boclé. Une méthode conçue en 3 temps pour vous permettre d'apprendre et de retenir des quantités astronomique d'informations, même si vous vous sentez vieux, même si vous avez l'impression d'être très occupé et que vous ne trouvez jamais le temps de lire. J'ai passé les 5 dernières années de ma vie à comprendre ce qui différenciait les gens les plus brillants, ceux capables de mémoriser
those assumptions. Or you can use them to add notes to remind yourself or other developers to do something in the code. So comments are good, but too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
Too much of one thing is a bad thing. Too much of one thing.
But too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
Too much of a good thing is bad thing.
In this tutorial, I'm going to talk to you guys about classes in Python. Classes are extremely important in programming and
the classes in Java are tools that we can use like ¿cómo se dice eso? No sé cómo se dice eso. Bueno, plain, flat map, flat building, flat building. Flat. Level on a smooth with no curve height or bars. Level but having little or no height. Interesting. With not electrical power left my car lights on the now my battery is flat. If a drink is flat, it has to stop being busy and bubbles. Complete or certain or change. Something such as a tire or ball is flat does not so contain enough air, especially if an amount of money it profit sells. Flat a set of room for living in a building are usually on order brick flats, an area of low level and rough than near water. Plane, it's a plane. A vehicle designed for traveling mathematical flat, a particularly rare standard. The poet's treatment of subject leaves of mythical plate. He works on a complete from plane from to remove all the small trips. A plane edge surface. Plane edge. A plane edge surface. Vehicle. Plane. An aircraft with wings and one more engines. I'll get the next plane to London. He's on a plane at the moment on his way to Chicago. Plano dice design plan, plano de plano de plan. Croquis. Sketch. It's like a sketch. Okay, it's like a sketch. It's better. Okay, the class in Java also can as a sketch, and we can use it. Use them after. We can create objects. We can create objects a partir de from these classes using inheritance. Yes, in Java classes are like blueprints, sketches for creating objects. They define properties, attributes, and behaviors methods the objects can have. You can also reuse classes using inheritance to create a specialized version. It's not as easy as we think, but it's not as difficult as we can think also. How it's in Python. Python also has classes, objects, and inheritance, but the syntax is different. Class doc animal inheritance from animal class animal def make sound animal makes a sound. Python define objects. Objects are created from classes. Inheritance allows one class to reuse another class attributes and methods. Would you like to record?
And they're not specific to Python. In fact, a lot of other programming languages do support the notion of class Python. In this tutorial, I'm going to talk to you guys about classes in Python. Classes are extremely important in programming, and they're not specific to Python. In fact, a lot of other programming languages do support the notion of classes. We use classes to define new types. For example, so far, we have learned about the basic types in Python, like numbers, strings, and booleans. These are the basic or simple types in Python. You also learn about a couple of complex types, like lists and dictionaries. While these types are extremely useful, they cannot always be used to model complex concepts. For example, think of the concept of a point or a shopping cart. A shopping cart is not a boolean. It's not a list. It's not a dictionary. It's a different kind of thing. So we can use classes to define new types to model real concepts. Now, in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to define a new type called point. And this new type is going to have methods for working with points. For example, back to our main program, let's create a list, numbers, 1, 2, 3. You know that here, when we type dot, we get access to these functions or methods available in list objects. Now, similar to this, we're going to create a new type called point. This point is going to have methods like move, draw, get, distance from another point. These are the operations that we can perform on points. So let me show you how to do this. We start by defining a class using the class keyword, and right after that, we give our class a name. Now look at the naming convention I have used here. I've capitalized the first letter here. This is what we call Pascal naming convention. So the convention we use for naming our classes is different from the convention we use for naming our variables and functions. For variables and functions, we always use lowercase letters, and we separate multiple words using an underscore. But when naming classes, we don't use an underscore to separate multiple words. Instead, we capitalize the first letter of every word. So in this case, our class has only a single word. If it had multiple words, let's say email client, look, I've capitalized the first letter of every word. Once again, this is called Pascal naming convention, and it comes from the old Pascal language that you might have heard of. So back to our point class. Here we add a colon, which means we're going to define a block. Now in this block, we can define all the functions or methods that belong to points. For example, we can define a function called move for moving a point. Now note that as soon as we type open parentheses, PyCharm automatically adds self here. This is a special keyword, and we're going to get back to this shortly. So for now, in this method, let's print move on the terminal. Now let's define another method like draw. So define draw. And in this method, let's print draw on the terminal. Now let's remove the indentation. We're done with the definition of our point class. So we need to add 2 line breaks. Okay? So with this class, we defined a new type. With this new type, we can create new objects. So an object is an instance of a class. A class simply defines.
It's an instance from the class.
The blueprint or the template for creating objects, and objects are the actual instances based on that blueprint. So we could have tens or hundreds of points on the screen. These are the objects or the instances. So to create an object, we type out the name of our class and then call it like a function. This creates a new object and then returns it. So we can store that object in a variable. Let's call that point1. There you go. Now when we use the dot operator, look, we have these 2 methods that we defined, draw and move. We also have a bunch of other methods that start with 2 underscores. These are called magic methods. We'll look at them later in the course. So now let's call the draw method of our point object and run our program. So you can see draw is printed on the terminal. Now, apart from methods, these objects can also have attributes, and these attributes are like variables that belong to a particular object. For example, here, after we define point 1, we can set point1.x to 10 and point1.y to 20. Now we can easily print out these attributes. Let's print point1.x and run our program one more time. Take a look. So the x coordinate of point 1 is 10. Now we can create another object. Let's call that point 2. So point 2, once again, we type out the name of our class and then call it like a function. Now this object is completely different from the first object. So if we print point2.x, look, we get this attribute error because this point object doesn't have an attribute called x. So each object is a different instance of our point class. And here we can assign a value to point2.x. Let's set that to 1 and then run our program. So we can see the x coordinate of point 2 is 1. So to recap, we use classes to define new types. These types can have methods that we define in the body of the class, and they can also have attributes that we can set anywhere in our programs.
Okay. Just to recapitalize.
Set, define. We use classes to define
new types.
These types can have methods that we define in the
These classes can have methods that we define in the body of the class.
body of the class, and they can also have attributes that we can
have attributes that we can set anywhere.
set anywhere in our programs. So to recap,
entonces aquí estamos creando un objeto. ¿Cierto? Okay, we pass an attribute attribute to our how can we pass an attribute to our object already in Python? Modify the class to add any other dynamically. Unlike Java and Python, you can dynamically add attributes and is created. Okay, you can modify an attribute at any time. Creation. If you want better control, you can create a method to add or modify attributes. You can create a method or to add or modify attributes. If you want better control, you can create a method to add or modify attributes. Okay. If an object directly. Okay, but mi pregunta es que tengo la definición. Point improvement. Move throw. Move throw. Move point throw. Object add. How can I see the attributes of an object already here? But after attributes, you can see the attributes and already including in the following methods. We should start with sensitivity. Print point punto init no Dict. Choose only sensitivities. Deal, Mike. Draw move. Draw on move. Class. No. ¿Cómo fue que crearon acá arriba? Car. Vamos a move. Why we put as a parámetro. In Python, we include the first parameter in the instance method. Class refers to we allow the method to access instance variable that is call other methods and on the origin self-run. Yes. Like this JavaScript. Yes, in JavaScript the concept sells estamos fundamentalmente initially. JavaScript has a stick with its keyboard. Okay. Bueno, se acabó el pomodoro. Vamos a ir a los 5 minutos de descanso. Estamos aprendiendo clases y cómo se puede interactuar con ellas. ¿Listo? Muchas gracias. Ya nos vemos. Bye bye.